Um, After Donald Trump sycophants stormed Capitol Hill on January 6th in a bid to halt the certification of Joe Biden's election, many people had described their actions as seditious or even treason, which it was, but the Republicans don't see it as that because they're fucking retarded. Um, and some scholars say key figures in the attacks would qualify for sedition, conspiracy under the U.S. statutes, though it's less clear any would meet the criteria for treason. Sedition and treason cases are rarer, especially in the modern era. According to the FBI, the U.S. government has successfully convicted fewer than 12 cases for people of treason in the nation's history, and here are some notable treason and sedition cases. Aaron Burr. Former, the former Vice President Aaron Burr was tried in 1807 for treason for allegedly plotting to urge some states to leave the Union as part of military adventures to seize land from Spain and Mexico. His trial was an early test of treason as defined in the Constitution, which says it consists only in levying war against the U.S. or giving enemies aid and comfort. The jury people acquitted Burr after instructions that prosecutors had to show not just that Burr made plans to go to war, but actually went to war against the United States. The name Benedict Arnold, an American military officer who crossed lines to join the British during the Revolutionary War, became synonymous with the word treason, but he was never captured or even tried for it. The Christiana resistance. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but escaped slaves in Christiana, Pennsylvania, and several white people who aided them were charged with treason back in 1851 for resisting the U.S. Marshals seeking to capture the escaped slaves. Following acquittals at an initial trial, in which lawyers argued the resistance was not akin to levying war, charges were dropped against the 40 people that were indicted. Jefferson Davis, he was the president of the Confederacy. Jefferson Davis was charged with treason, but his prosecution was later abandoned, in part as an effort at reconciliation following the Civil War. And while scholars say that they clearly fit the criteria for treason, no Confederate generals or statesmen ever faced any charges of that. Tokyo Rose. Among the last convictions for treason was an American-born Iba Dikino, known as Tokyo Rose during World War II for her anti-American broadcasts. She was convicted in 1949 of giving aid and comfort to Japan. She served more than 6 years of a 10-year prison sentence before she was released. The former president then, President Gerald Ford, had pardoned her after reports that the U.S. authorities pressured her and some witnesses to lie. Some former prisoners of war in Japan also came forward to confirm that Takino had smuggled food and medicine to them during their capture. Several other Americans of Japanese and German descent were convicted of treason for giving aid and comfort to Imperial Japan and the Nazi Germany, but some also later received pardons and had their sentences commuted. Adam Gadan. He was the only American charged with treason against the U.S. since the World War II era was Adam Gadan, also known as Azam the American. His 2006 federal indictment said he gave Al-Qaeda aid and comfort with intent to betray the United States, and before he could be put on trial, Gadan was killed in a drone strike in Pakistan. Sheikh Omar Abdelrahman. The seditious conspiracy law was last successfully used in the 1990s. In the prosecution of Islamic militants who plotted to bomb New York City landmarks, an Egyptian cleric, Sheikh Omar Abdelrahman, and 9 others were convicted in 1995 of seditious conspiracy and other charges in a plot to blow up the United Nations, which was the FBI's building, and 2 tunnels and a bridge linking New York and New Jersey. Abdul Rahman, known as the Blind Sheikh, argued on appeal that he was never involved in any planning actual attacks against the U.S. and his hostile rhetoric was protected free speech. He ended up dying in a federal prison back in 2017. Puerto Rican nationalists. The seditious conspiracy charges were successfully brought in another, now largely forgotten storming of a Capitol building back in 1954. 4 pro-independence Puerto Rican activists had rushed the building and opened fire on the House floor, wounding several representatives, and they and more than a dozen others who assisted in the attack were convicted of seditious conspiracy. Oscar Lopez Rivera, a former leader of a Puerto Rican independence group that orchestrated a bombing campaign that left dozens of people dead or maimed in the 1970s and 80s, and they spent 35 years in prison, for seditious conspiracy before President Barack Obama commuted their sentence in 2017. Now, let's see if I say this one right. The Houthi militia. The last time U.S. prosecutors brought such a case was in 2010, in an alleged Michigan plot by members of the Houthi militia to incite an uprising against the government, but a judge ordered acquittals on the sedition conspiracy charges at a 2012 trial, saying that prosecutors relied too much on hateful diatribes that were protected by the First Amendment and didn't, as required, prove the accused ever had detailed plans for a rebellion. 3 members of the militia pleaded guilty to weapons charges, but these are the most famous these are the most notable cases of sedition and treason, if you follow that logic.